Sweet, good stuff. Awesome. So, yeah, thanks very much for being here. Thanks to the folks that have organised it all. I got roped into the volunteering team last minute because I think they had a few dropouts. So, Gethin's been very kind, giving me credit for helping moderate on the channel, but it's the hard work of people like Gethin and Kevin Justin to get the event on that is the reason we're all here today. So thanks to them for sticking on the event. Also, thank you to you folks for turning up and deciding to watch this particular session because the lineup is awesome. I know when I looked at the schedule, I sort of saw who I clashed with and thought, oh, I'd have watched that if I could. So hopefully I'll be able to catch up with the recordings. I am here to talk to you about why the new Power BI card visual is the best thing since sliced bread. Good old introductions first for people who don't know me. So my name is Johnny Winter. I'm based in Preston in Lancashire, here in the UK. My day job is working for Advancing Analytics. So I'm a consultant for Advancing Analytics. We are a data engineering, analytics, and AI consultancy. We are Microsoft and Databricks partners, and we kind of specialize in doing Lakehouse implementations, but all the facets around that. So the engineering parts, the analytics that might sit on top of that Lakehouse, and then also any sort of advanced analytics and data science type tasks as well. So that's where I earn my money. In my spare time, I run the website Grayskull Analytics. Lots of people think that is my job and that I earn money from that. I do not earn a penny from it. It is just a hobby of mine. If you go to grayskullanalytics.com, there's a blog there. I've also got a YouTube channel as well. And on there, I predominantly focus on Power BI because Power BI is really my first love. I don't think my wife would let me be happy with me saying that, but yeah, certainly Power BI is the part of working in data that I'm most enthusiastic about. And I guess related to that, I help run the Power BI Manchester user group. So that is one of the longest running and largest user groups here in the UK. It started back in 2017. I actually went to the very first one, but I only actually joined the organising team earlier this year. In terms of my background as a data professional, I have been doing data things since 2007. So 2007 was when I first started using business intelligence tools. I know that because somewhere in my house I have a certificate for when I passed a Crystal Reports course. But that career has evolved, and I've gone from being sort of more an analyst and doing the reporting side to getting more involved in the back end and data warehousing, predominantly using Microsoft type products. That's been across lots of different industries. So worked there in the defense industry, online retail, financial services and travel. And then my last 3 roles have all been consultancy jobs. So I've been doing consultancy for a few years now. I always like to point out the fact that I don't come from a particularly technical background either. So I say I've been doing this for, 16 years? That makes me feel old. But I didn't go to uni and do some kind of computing degree. I was doing politics and philosophy. Then I dropped out and worked in a bar. Then I did some customer service jobs and just kind of fell into data completely accidentally. So I think if I can have this kind of career in data, I think anybody can. You don't need to have gone to university to have done it. Right, to the topic. So I've got a bit of a backstory, and this is going back to around about 18 months ago now, to March 2022, and to the Power BI user group. So this is before I joined the organising team, and having been a regular attendee, when I decided that I wanted to start potentially doing some presentations and some speaking, it made sense as a regular attendee of this particular group to say to the organisers, I'm interested in presenting. Can I do a presentation, please? And they said, yep, no worries. We'll get you signed up. We'll get you booked in. And so grateful to them for giving me my very first speaking opportunity. And they put me on the bill with Augustin. So Augustin is a consultant as well. I can't remember the name of the company he works for, but he's based in Stuttgart in Germany. And he dialed in remotely and gave his session, and I did mine in person. And his session was entitled The Power BI Good, Bad and Ugly. And it was a really good session. It covered loads of topics, things like data modeling best practices, DAX best practices, and they started to go in some data visualization best practices and things like why pie charts aren't always the best visual, and the best way to label charts. And one of the topics that he covered is that if you stick a KPI card onto a report, don't just leave it there as a number that sits by itself. Make sure you provide some kind of context. So if you look at a dashboard and there's a KPI card and it says 100 million, what does 100 million mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Make sure that if you're going to put KPI cards into your dashboards, add some context so that you're going to provide meaning to the people that are going to be consuming that dashboard. And then I came on and did my presentation. And here's me aspiring to be a Power BI expert. And I broke one of Augustin's cardinal rules, which was slightly embarrassing. I had to say at the time, great presentation, Augustin. Really like the point you make about making sure you add context. Apologies, everybody. This is a bad example and doesn't provide context. Now, ultimately, there was a reason for that for me. I mean, it wasn't the main part of my talk. My talk didn't really have the focus on those KPI cards. But even so, for me, it was a conscious decision to use this type of visual. So we've got a KPI card in the top right of that dashboard, and then a multi-card KPI below that. And that was a conscious decision on my part. I know exactly why I made those choices. So I guess I want to take us on a bit of a journey in terms of understanding how I could have potentially added some more context to the way I've displayed those KPIs, and then B, talking about actually why I consciously made a decision not to. Before I jump in on that, I want to talk a little bit about adding context to KPIs that are being displayed. And to do that, I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie Evergreen. So again, I don't know if people can stick to reactions in the chat, whether or not they've heard of Stephanie Evergreen before. She is a data visualization consultant. You hear about people like your Stephen Fuse of the world, who I think get an awful lot of attention from the data viz communities. And I've always found Stephanie to be a bit of an unsung hero, and I really like her website. I really like her content, and she did this blog about friends don't like friends, use stoplight color schemes. Because I think the temptation, if you want to add context to a KPI, is to default to RAG status. Green is good, red is bad, possibly amber if something's indifferent. And she really, really hates this as an approach, and she gives good reason for it. So firstly, it's not colorblind friendly. So if you're doing reds, greens, and ambers, it might look good if you're not colorblind. I'm fortunate that I'm not, but it looks terrible otherwise. Doesn't work well for printing. So although in the age of interactive analytics and self-service, we kind of try to encourage people to print things off less, I still certainly have worked with clients who still wanted a printed artifact at the end of the day, and that RAG status just won't work from a black and white perspective. And then she basically sort of says that if you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing. So her preference is that if you're going to provide that context, decide whether or not you're going to flag up the positives or flag up the negatives, but concentrate on drawing attention to one of those things, as opposed to trying to cover your dashboards with lots and lots and lots and lots of busy conflicting indicators. So with that advice in mind, I'm going to heed Stephanie's advice as I go through my demo, and I'm going to take us to the demo cave. So here is my Power BI demo cave, and I'm just going to step through kind of, I guess, the evolution of how some of these KPI cards could work. So here is the multi-card visual. This was my visual of choice when I did my dashboard, and there's some things to like about it, there's some things to really not like about it. So first of all, the fact that this is kind of taken up a small amount of estate on this particular page. I wanted to lay this out as a nice sort of 4x4 grid, and ideally I'd probably like it to be a bit bigger, but as soon as I do that, it goes horribly wrong. I just get a load of white space. As soon as I start adjusting the size of it, it starts cropping and like cutting off things like my labels. So it's terrible from that perspective. It doesn't give me any kind of control around my number formats. So I have to display the full figure. I can't just have this to like a number of decimal places and an abbreviation to make it a little bit easier to consume. So there's a lot of numbers there to try and get my head around, when really I probably could have shown that as, say, 3.8 billion or 4.2 billion. So that doesn't work particularly well either. And then you've got limited options in terms of adding any kind of conditional formatting as well. So in terms of me adding a formatting, if I want to say that I want to see whether or not my sales revenue is growing year on year or something like that, and then also whether or not my costs are growing year on year, I can add some conditional formatting. So I can choose in my format, in my call out values, I can change my fonts, I can change the background as well. Where are we going? Background, here we go. So I can conditionally change these with some rules, but I can only change them based on one metric. So I'm looking at sales revenue year on year, and it's turned my entire card this kind of reddy orange color. But I can't differentiate between whether or not I want my sales to react to the sales year on year measure, but my quantities to react to my quantities year on year measure. And so ultimately, using that particular style of card gives me limited options, and I struggle to have effective ways to provide the context that Augustine recommends. So as an alternative, I can look at using KPI cards instead. So here I have got a set of 16 KPIs. With these 16 KPIs, I'm able to take up more estate on my screen, so they're nice and easy to read. I get some better formatting options in terms of whether or not I want to abbreviate and show my measures to a particular level of decimal accuracy and things like that. I can change the sizes. I can change the sizes of the fonts and the sizes of the labels. So it gives me a little bit more. Can I add some context to this in terms of some conditional formatting parts? Yes, I absolutely can. So I can now show that for all these cards on the left-hand side, which are sales revenue-based measures, they are looking at the sales revenue year on year. And if we are basically down year on year, it's going to turn each of these cards this red color. But then I don't have to look at sales revenue when I'm considering costs. So costs have gone down as well, but that's a good trend. So it's not flagged up as a bad indicator. But our margins have gone down too. So again, we've got the conditional formatting in terms of our background and fonts, and then our unit quantities have gone up as well. So it looks stripy and a bit pretty to an extent, but that you've got ways and means that you can add some context. Now, one of the other best practices I would definitely sort of recommend is not just potentially using color to provide that context, but some kind of iconography as well to demonstrate if trends are up and or down. And so if we want to do that, you can use the KPI cards. So the KPI cards give you a little bit more flexibility. So we can see for a bad trend, we've got this exclamation mark. For a good trend, we've got a tick. These still have some slight limitations because this condition in terms of what I want to show is a positive or a negative trend can only be based on the measure that's inside of the card. So I can't ultimately like flush that particular indicator through all of the cards that are in the same category. I can only base it on the sales revenue, because sales revenue is in that card. It has to be self-contained. And also the formatting options on these KPI cards are a little bit less than the regular card visual. So I have to have my title at the top. I can't stick it under the bottom. So this looks a little bit inconsistent and potentially a little bit messy. But I guess ultimately, in terms of the concept Augustine was talking about, in terms of providing context, I would argue that this is probably the best version you could have. So if this is the best version that you could have, why did I consciously decide not to adopt this when I built my dashboard? And the reason for that is because I'm a performance nut. I like efficiency. I like to write snappy, efficient DAX, and I want my dashboards to be nice and responsive. In my multi-card card, I could display all 16 measures in one visual, and that means making one call to my data model to process the DAX, and that also means rendering of one visual. When I go for this version on the screen now, it's 16 separate cards. That means 16 separate DAX queries querying my data, and also 16 separate objects to have to render. So Power BI can only render so many things at the same time, so you end up getting some conflicts and some queuing. My demo data set is relatively small, so the performance of this is slightly slower because it's a relatively small data set. It's not particularly noticeable. But what I can do is I can show you more explicitly if I actually do some benchmarking and performance testing. So yeah, API card first. The thing I have to make sure I don't forget to do is turn on Performance Analyzer and start recording, because otherwise that will ruin the entire point. If I render this copy of it now, you can see all those DAX queries running. Basically, for the visual to render, it can only be as fast as its slowest part. So if I sort that by total time, so that's pushing 4 seconds in theory for that to render. And what you'll find in here as well is you'll get this other time. So what's actually happened is my DAX query was really, really quick, but it spent almost 3.5 seconds waiting for the capacity to be able to render. So round about pushing 4 seconds for that to have rendered. If we go to this version, so again, I need to turn on my Performance Analyzer and make sure I start recording, and hope that the demo gods are smiling on me, so that when I click onto my multi-card and this renders, there we go. It is run in less than 3 seconds, 2.8 seconds. So we've gone from nearly 4 to less than 3. So this version of the card is more efficient, which is why I chose to go down that route. No, I do not want to save that. Okay, back to the slides. So I screenshotted the performance on this because whilst I was, I guess, practicing this demonstration, I got really, really inconsistent results. And although 9 times out of 10, the multi-card was always faster, the 10th time, for some reason, presumably because I was having other things running on my laptop at the time, gave me some inconsistent results. So I snapshotted some just to be safe, but pretty consistently that multi-card, as you can see there, only submits one DAX query, only has to render one visual versus all 16, which is pretty much always slower. So what does that mean? It means that ultimately we've got to make sacrifices. We've got what's the word I'm looking for? I've lost my words. You've got to basically make compromises in terms of what you want to do. So the multi-row card performs well, and it's actually pretty quick to build as well. But the formatting options are horrible. The conditional formatting is very, very limited, so it's difficult to add context, and you've got no facility with those to add icons. I guess ultimately you could get into the world of some janky DAX where you could maybe concatenate the values with a little icon type thing, but ultimately natively that's quite difficult to do. Using multiple cards and the KPIs, having been able to format each card separately is a nice pro. And with the KPI cards, you can also add those icons, so you get the opportunity to add some great context. But it's going to run multiple DAX queries, which then means that you've got to hit your engine multiple times. You've got to queue for rendering. Ultimately, that's going to render slower. And then even then with the KPI cards, you can only set your conditional formatting to be referencing one measure. So yeah, we have to make compromise. Or do we? Because in June of this year, there was the announcement of the new card visual, which hopefully goes a long way to address some of the issues I've talked about there. So back to my demo cave. GNU. Oh no, I closed the wrong thing. It was very annoying. There we go. Cool. I'm going to see how quickly I can build myself a multi-card visual. So it is this new thing with the Lightning card here. I'm going to pull this on, drag this out. I need to add some measures to it. So
Johnny, sorry, mate, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, there we go. It's just popped on. I think it's my internet. Apologies, my friend. It's me. I was just. But now terrible. I can. My fault. I'll go back to not interrupting. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, so I need to add measures to the multi-card. I want to show revenue, and then cost, and then margin and unit quantity. Then I want to compare that with last year. I want to show a year on year. And then I want to show my growth. Okay, so that's a pretty ugly start. It gets better, I promise. So let's have a look at here. What do we want? We want layout wise, I would like this to be vertical alignment. Yep. Where are you? Layout. Oh, I can't find the option. Here we are, grid. So I want this to be a 4x4 grid. Excellent, good stuff. In my cards themselves, I would like my callouts to be center aligned. I would like my display units to be to 1 decimal, and I would like my label to be below. So setting aside the time for me to get completely lost in the UI and not find the right option, I have built my multi-card really nice and quickly there, and we are basically, we've reproduced this version of the card really, really quickly. Okay, so it's a good start. What else do I want to do here? I want to get rid of my background on my cards. I can't remember the options. I'm just going to leave it. So I've got my basic KPI card here. Now I want to start adding some context to it. So I'm going to go to my cards option here. I'm going to start with my sales revenue card here. So let's pick sales revenue. For my fill, I want to make this conditional. So based on my, let's change this to rules. Based on my year on year, my year on year is less than 0, then I want to set my fill to be my nice red color. If if my, where are we going? For my sales revenue, if my year on year is less than 0, I want it to be white. And then I need to add that same thing on my label as well. Cool, so we've managed to add that context nice and quickly. I'm not going to make you watch me do that for all 16 cards. Effectively, we've gotten from, we're now basically at this iteration of a card. but doing it in a single visual so we can reproduce that nice and easily. Is there anything else we could do? Do we want to perhaps try and add some more context? Because I guess in terms of those KPI cards, we had a nice icon. And so there's something we can do to add some icons on this. So again, I'm going to go to my cards here, and there is an option here for me to add an image. Okay, so I'm going to, just for my sales revenue card, I'm going to switch that on, and I can browse here, and I've got a cute little icon. Oh, crumbs, I'm going to have to find it now. There we go. Cute little icon all set up so that I can display next to it a little symbol. And I guess that looks slightly pretty, and it might be good to have a little image next to each of my different measures. But it still isn't really adding much context. It just makes it look a little bit prettier. So I'm actually not a huge fan for what I'm trying to display here of using that method. What I do have here is an image URL option instead. And if I select the image URL option, it does give me the option to make this conditional. So effectively, I can start to add an image conditionally. So I guess ways and means I could do that is I could maybe create some icons and store them in blob storage, or maybe Google Drive, and then conditionally reference the URL to be able to store the image. But you're relying then on something that's going to be sitting outside of your report. So what you can do instead is use SVGs, which is single vector graphics. And to give you some examples of that, oh, blimey. Here we go. We've got some single vector graphics here, a little down triangle and a little up triangle. And effectively, I can build those using a measure. And if I give you an example of what that looks like here. So what I'm doing is I'm specifying I want the color for it to be. I'm giving it some SVG code, so it's actually going to build my shape out for me. I'm concatenating that with this prefix, which is basically what turns it into a URL that can be referenced using that image field. And then I've just got a little bit of code here so that I'm taking my SVG code and replacing the default color with a color of my choice, so I can do some things around controlling what that looks like. Now, I love my DAX and I enjoy writing it, but to write something like this off the top of your head is going to be pretty daunting. In terms of that SVG specification, I'm not going to pretend that it's something that I could write from scratch off the top of my head. So I'm going to show you an SVG cheat code, and that is to use this, which is a program called Figma. So Figma is a design tool. You can use an online version of it. There's a desktop app as well if you want that too. There's a free tier of it. There's also a paid tier, but for this, I'm just using the free tier here. I've opened a new Figma design document. I've got a shape tool here where I can draw some shapes. So I'm going to draw myself a polygon here, and I can just change some of the properties up here in the top right corner. Let's go just to zoom that in so you can see what I'm doing. Let's get this nice even proportions. And currently it's got a triangle because it's got 3 points, but we do love a hexagon at Advancing Analytics. So let's turn that into 6 points. And I'm now creating myself an icon. And if I right click this, I can do copy or copy and paste as, copy as SVG. So if I click that, I'm going to nip across now to Notepad. And just paste that code in here. That has written my SVG code for me. Now I need to pass that to DAX as a text string. And you can see that currently there's text qualified within this string using double quotes. So just the thing that I need to do is do a find and replace. I'm just going to do double quotes or single quotes and replace all. And I've now got the format string that I want. And then just to demonstrate how simple it is to build out these potential measures, let's copy that code. Let's add a new measure here. I'm going to call this hexagon. I'm going to specify the color as red. You can use hex codes for this, but for the sake of, I would normally use hex codes to be honest, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to type it in. Let's grab this, replace this. Come back to my report now and pull this on. One last step you've got to do. So once you've set that up, you just need to make sure that you set your data category as an image URL. And then magically, we've created ourselves some icons that we can now reference and use and pass through to our new card visual. So let's go back here and select my card again. The other thing that I need to do is I need to have a DAX measure that's going to have a switch so we know which icon I want to be able to return. So for my sales revenue indicator, it's a really, really simple indicator here. I'm basically sort of saying that for my sales revenue, if it's less than 0, show the down triangle, and if obviously then if it's not less than 0, show the up triangle. I come here, come to for my sales revenue card, switch on the image, change that to image URL, go to my conditional formatting, and I want this to be on my sales revenue indicator. There'll be a little bit of formatting I need to do to this because I just need to sort of set a size for it. So 50 pixels looks good. And I've now got a card that's given me some context in terms of the colors it's showing. So that gives us some context for it, and also some kind of trend. Again, you don't really want to sit and wait and watch me do all of those. So you can configure it on a card by card basis. Also, you can set that condition across. You can reuse basically the same measure across multiple cards. So I've only actually created 4 indicator measures to achieve this. And all of my revenue cards are based on the revenue year-on-year trend. All of my sales are based on year-on-year trend, and so on and so forth. So I would say that in terms of wanting to provide that context, we've gone beyond what was previously possible, because if I go back to this one, this had all the color context in terms of providing the conditional formatting. We could have icons in some places but not others, whereas this version, wrong one, gives the context across the entire visual. Now, the great thing is it gets better than that. So even though we've probably gone beyond our original scope in terms of doing that, using that new visual cards to try and reproduce that view that was previously using 16 cards, there are even more features that we can start plugging in to this particular visual. So I've just done a really, really small demonstration here. I've got my sales revenue measure here. I've also got a DAX measure for Adidas sales, which is just literally saying, show me the sales revenue where the product manufacturer is Adidas. And for this particular example, for this sales data set, we don't sell any Adidas products. So we've got a blank return. Now, the great thing with the visual is that for our cards, there are some really cool things you can do in terms of how the values get displayed. So from a callout perspective, I can, on the values, decide how I want to show my blanks. So by default, I can just, it normally displays a couple of dashes. Oh, why are you not working? That's because I'm doing the wrong card. Adidas sales, there we go. In fact, we can do that across all cards. Let's do it for all cards. By default, it normally puts a couple of dashes in. But it's quite often a customer requirement to show zeros and things like that. In the past, if you wanted to do that, you'd get into the realms of writing some janky DAX that would switch what gets displayed in terms of providing those zeros. And Nikolai Illich has a great blog around the fact that actually converting values to zero is really, really inefficient and can give you some really, really strange results. So it's not necessarily the best way to do it using DAX. This gives you a bit more flexibility in performance because that's not a DAX-based thing, it's just a display-based thing. UV has asked, is it possible to have one measure to control all indicators and apply to the whole series? I haven't experimented with it enough to figure that out. I wondered whether or not there was something you could do with maybe calculation groups or field parameters to sort of dynamically pick up the context of the measure and then do it that way round. I have not experimented enough to figure out whether or not that is feasible or not. So as it stands currently, it's a case of a measure per indicator you want to do, but I don't want to put my neck on the line and say that it is impossible. It's just something that I haven't yet discovered a way to do. So hope that answers that, UV. Yeah, so you've got, going back to the slide, you've got basically additional things you can now add. So we're starting to get more and more capability beyond what was already available in the existing KPI card options. I actually, because this was a late addition to my presentation that I only added this morning, also meant to include a reference to this Data Meerkat website where Stefan Ressel has done a load of great work in terms of like some of the amazing things you can do with SVG images as well. So he does them and makes them really, 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 really dynamic so that it can take, not just show you a particular icon, but actually change the properties of that icon on a regular basis. So it's a good thing to dig into to show some more context. You can do things like dynamic trend lines as well as icons with this as well. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention too. So being able to blanket control how you want to represent blanks, great new feature. There is more. There's even other stuff that you can do with this as well, which existing KPI cards could not do previously. So if I am deliberately pausing here because I don't want to accidentally give away the surprise, but if I go over onto this card visual and hover over a particular one, I can create tooltips. So this now for my sales revenue, in terms of adding that extra context, I can display a tooltip page that is dynamic as well. So it is showing that that's showing my sales revenue month by month. But if I go to cost, that's going to show me the cost. If I go to margin, that's going to show me the margin. Sales quantity I've not set up. And the reason I have not set that up is because I wanted to just quickly demonstrate how it's done. So there's a couple of things that you need to do in terms of the visual itself. On the properties page, you need to have the tooltips switched on, and then you need to set the tooltips to auto. So that you're not going to a specific tooltip page, it's automatically deciding which tooltip page to use. Just zoom in on that so you can see it. And then you need to build a tooltip page. So I've got one here for unit quantity. Again, the tooltip pages themselves aren't actually dynamic. So that's 4 separate tooltips for each one. Again, I would be really interested, UV, to figure out whether or not I could dynamically control the content of my card instead, so it only had one card. But yeah, we come to here. In the page information, we need to basically come to this tooltip element, and for show tooltip data on, add which measures I want to be able to trigger the tooltip. So this is my unit quantity one. I want to add all of my unit quantity measures. It is annoying that you have to add them one at a time. There we go. So we've got all 4 unit quantity measures. It's really annoying as well because as soon as you start adding the measures that you want to trigger the tooltip, it defaults it to a drill through. So you have to change that back to tooltip. Yeah, also that means that because it became a drill through, it wants a big old button, which I don't want. But now having made those changes, when I come back to here, here, now my sales unit 1, demo gods are smiling on me. I've now got unit quantity flagging up as a tooltip. So yeah, another opportunity to add some more context. Just going to quickly answer UV's question on whether or not you can do that show blank in tables and matrices. At this point in time, I don't think so. I think it's just a feature of this. I would possibly double check that. I'm fairly certain you can only do it on the card visual at the moment. So yeah, you can add tooltips onto the new card visual, and they can be dynamic depending on which measure it is. Again, I've just done it so that everything in this column goes to the revenue tooltip, everything in this column goes to the cost tooltip. It does not stop there. There is still more goodness from the KPI card visual. So if blimey, I didn't even realize that I'd done this on the same card. That's how maverick I was feeling. Not only did I include tooltips on here, if I right click, I can have a drill through as well. So if I want to actually understand more about my sales revenue, not only can I get that tooltip that was giving me my month by month trends, I can actually drill in further and start to show more detailed information on the dashboard. So yeah, I've now got all my revenue headline KPIs. I've got that month by month performance showing my growth trend as well. And then I'm also listing out actually what the top 10 products by revenue that are performing for me. And again, that becomes that is dynamic. So if I go to margin instead, I can drill through to my sales margin, drill through instead. And again, this is now showing me different measures. So again, we not only have we managed to reproduce what the old card visual could give us, we're going beyond it and getting more features as well. And just to show you how that works. So again, for my sales quantity, I've not currently configured a drill through. Again, it is a case of you have to have a separate page for each drill through, or at least so far that's how I've done it. It works in a very similar way. So you go to the page information, you need to add data here. And apologies whilst you painfully watch me add all of these one at a time. It would be great if they just had a little multi-select box that you could add these more than once. Maybe I should get in touch with Jay and tell him that. Again, it default. Oh, it is a drill through. So that's good. Fine. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, if I come back to here, and that now should have enabled drill through on it, so I can drill through based on any unit quantity measure as well. We are now not only be able to provide more context, but we're able to then enhance that kind of discoverability and interaction in terms of what that can do. And spoiler alert, because I clicked on the wrong tab. All of that looks fantastic, and it gives me some great features. But how does that perform compared to the other ones that we looked at? So back here again, let's switch on that performance analyzer again and start recording. I've got basically a duplication of that card visual with all the tooltips and all the drill throughs included as well. So it's a fully featured version. Again, let's see if the demo gods are smiling on me. There we go, less than 3 seconds. That is pretty much, it's just rendered one visual. It's just sent one DAX query. It is taken less than 3 seconds to visual from a cold startup as well. So that's why I've done this in a separate fresh file as opposed to using the one that I had. And just so just to prove that it isn't just smoke and mirrors. Oh, maybe it is smoke and mirrors. I thought it looks like I have disabled the tooltips on this. And I don't really have time to set them back up again now. Did I get the drill throughs on it? Yeah, the drill throughs are still there. Yeah, anyway, the point being, we are getting all the features of using 16 different visuals. We are getting the performance of using a single, and we're getting features above and beyond that as well. So back to the slides. Again, just in case the demo gods were not smiling on me, I screenshot an earlier version of that just to show that it has comparable performance in terms of that multi-row card, and it was consistently significantly quicker than using several KPIs. So is this the best thing since sliced bread? Can I, with my sort of superlative opening gambit that this new visual is amazing, is it the best thing since sliced bread? So let's look at the benefits of actually using it. Because all those benefits of multi-row card, good performance. You could see that to get a basic version of it spun up was really, really quick. I didn't have to mess about too much with trying to align 16 different cards because you drag them on, set a grid. It was pretty fast to do. You've still got all those. You've still got all those really, really great formatting options that the single KPIs could give you. You've got the ability to expand that with using SVGs for conditional icons if you want, so you're able to add more context. And then on top of all of that, you get a load of new stuff as well. So you're getting the ability to make sure you've got consistent formats across all those cards. I guess actually one of the things I didn't cover was that if you wanted to, you could deliberately make that inconsistent. If you wanted to have different versions of formatting for different items, it gives you the flexibility to do it. But yeah, I like the consistency that you can apply. The conditions that you apply don't necessarily have to be based just on the value that's in the card itself, which is really good. You can customize those blank values. You've got the options to add tooltips, so that gives you even more context. And now you've got the option to do drill throughs as well, so you can enhance your navigation and storytelling. So there are all the reasons that I think this really is the best thing since sliced bread. But it does come with some health warnings, I guess. So it is still currently in preview. Now, quite often with preview features in something like Power BI, you might be encouraged to make sure you're not going to add this, add this to production reports. It's still quite experimental. I guess I would be lying to say that I haven't used this in production. I think it's relatively stable and the limitations are relatively well known. But I know some people have been tripped up by this. So I've got an example of Imran Haq. He was sort of said, "Oh no, I've broken it on desktop." This looks like he was using the glow, which I presume is why he's had that issue. But you've just got to be wary of the fact that there are still potentially some limitations there. But wait, there is more, and this is my attempt at showing a roadmap, because the product that was released back in June was ultimately just the first iteration of what the new card visual is going to be able to do. So they have already outlined, Power BI itself and Fabric have roadmaps, and the new card visual is so trailblazing it has to have its own roadmap by itself. So the stage 1 release, which is what I've been demonstrating today, multiple cards in a single container with loads of format settings and shape layout type stuff you can do. Stage 2, introducing indicator labels to add even more context and letting you add submetrics. So certainly in the original KPI cards, even though I didn't really show it today, you could add some little metrics in there. So they're going to add that capability and also natively bake in indicator labels. So I'm interested to see what that'll look like and see whether or not that's going to make things even easier, because you're not going to have to start building out custom SVGs. I'm sure the SVG option is still going to be there as well, though, to give you ultimate flexibility if the indicator labels aren't going to tick the box for you. And then stage 3, they're talking about being able to even split that into small multiples as well. So there's still more things to come. I seem to remember reading this article, and then it's from the Power BI blog. And then in the comments section somewhere below, somebody sort of said, "Oh, you know what would be a really good feature would be actually if it could do this as well." And Miguel Myers, who is running the future sort of visualization project, actually replied and said, there is actually a stage 4 on the roadmap. We just don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But yeah, we're actually already planning that for stage 4 as well. So yeah, things are happening. Beyond that roadmap as well, and again, this is like properly hot off the press because I did all my preparation for presenting today, and then of course the world of Power BI moves so quickly that when I logged on this morning, I had to make some updates to my slides because people have started to share already what some of that stage 2 functionality is going to look like. So this is expected for November release. It does have that disclaimer at the bottom that this is for reference purposes only and shouldn't be construed as the final design. Here we can see that there are those submetrics being added and those potential extra indicators. I'm still not seeing icons there per se, but until this is released, I can play around with it. Yeah, I don't really sort of know what that experience is going to be like, I guess. But yeah, as Ferris Bueller once said, life moves fast, so you need to pay attention to it. Yeah, a little sneaky insight into what might be coming. The Power BI folks as well are also notorious for delaying releases at the last minute if they find some kind of catastrophic bug. So even though this is expected November release, until I actually see it in desktop, it may yet get pushed. I famously got tripped up by this with a client recently because the new functionality for calculation groups was supposed to be released in September, and then they ended up pushing it back to the last month. So there we go. So bringing all that together in terms of all those benefits that we've can already realize today with this new visual, as well as the future improvements that are on the roadmap and what we've got, I have come to the conclusion that hands down, this is the best thing ever. And that is the end of the session. Thank you very much for coming.